थोड़ा सा बोर्ड बोर्ड टीचर स्टुडंटला दोन्ही आपल्याला दोन्ही दोघांना त्याला बोर्ड नाही दिसणार बोर्ड फक्त ते दोन कॅमेरे दोन कॅमेरे हा बोर्ड बोर्ड छोट्या स्क्रीन मध्ये बघायचं मोठ्या स्क्रीन मध्ये माहिती तेवढं दिसणार ना त्यांना दिसलं पाहिजे बघायचं पुढे गेलं शक्यतो मॉडेल दिसलं पाहिजे त्यांना
एग्जाम पीछे हो गया अरे मतलब इसमें 3 चैप्टर हैं सर मैथ्स में 3 था इस बार हां हां तो फिर बड़ा तो 40 मिनट ज्यादा याद होगा 4-5 अपने को तो 50 का कोई पोर्शन आ रहा है 80 का मेरे को देना मेरे अरे बताओ ये सब क्या देना 80% दिया पहले की देखिए भाई ऐसे सर को आ गए क्या है भाई पहले की देखिए सारे देखो ये तो है सारे कर दिया ना 2 मिनट आगे मैं एक कर दूंगा 1 मिनट और अरे दे ना अरे दे दो ना भाई कौन सा है और भी ना तो मुझे आ रहा है मतलब एकदम पूरा स्टेटमेंट के साथ नहीं लिखा लिख कर देंगे मैं भी नहीं लिखता मैं बहुत बार का आंसर भी है इंग्लिश कर इससे सारे पहले एमबीबीएस ना तो एमबीबीएस में आ गया हां अरे तू ही एक बार आया आज एमबीबीएस अबे मैं 2 बार आया हां तो तू इनसे जल्दी ज्वाइन कर ली फिर जल्दी ज्यादा अटेंशन दिया पता है क्या हां 3 में ऐसे हो गया मेरे तो मैंने कितना ज्वाइन किया है सोच हर तरह को बीमार कर रहा है ये डिस्कस क्वेश्चन क्या है दूसरे का नहीं है तीसरे का भी नहीं है फोर्थ का प्रोडेंट्री का एग्जांपल सादिया का मींस क्या बात सेम होता है मैंने बोला खराब है तो ऐसा कर Share in fancy there is a whole covering the stigma which are there is a wood party there the stigma which acts as a very and the pollen cannot other spring from one flower cannot reach the stigma of the another flower in the fancy cannot reach the stigma em bài không có chết rồi thì bây giờ đây người chơi đi cái nó đi nó là rồi tay cái với time भी नहीं कर रही अरे वो बुक से छापना I am very foreign grade ना ये था पीडीएफ इसके बाद ईमानदार बहुत ईमानदार and foreign grade is very like not clip shot cheating now the way to do what the other books are later तो बोला नाइन पांच से मैंने कब बोला था बुक मैंने कब बोला देख कर वही मैंने कब बोला देख एग्जाम में भी नहीं बोलते बुक देख के नहीं कर सकते नहीं बोलते एक बार क्या हुआ ना हमारे एग्जाम हमारा जो वेटेज लेके हमसे बात से दे रहा है क्या मेरे पापा ने बोला मैथ फिजिक्स क्लास में आके फायदा क्या ऑनलाइन मिल जाएगा तो फिर तू इधर बैठ चला मैं अंदर जाता हूँ वरना मोबाइल आगे इधर ही बैठ और अंदर ना अभी डिसेंट बोलते से भी कर रहे हो क्या बोल रहे हो
हमारे पट्टी को माहौल हमारे खाता हुआ मैंने आगे तो तीसरा भी कर दिया
chemistry next week friends.
मेरे बाजू में क्यों करेंगे हाँ हाँ कल से तुम लोग के लिए मैथ्स
देखा
हमारे लिए
ज्योग्राफी
ज्योग्राफी देखा और क्या ना तो चलता रहा है रोज वो आसान करके बोलने की बात है सर ये आपसे सिखा लेता हाँ मेरे पास मैं मतलब घर पे इधर आप
ऐसे ही है तू और इस पर हो जाएगा
हमें 3 चैप्टर ठीक होगा 3 चैप्टर मीटिंग अपने क्लास तो टीचर की बात करने लगते हैं 2-3 घंटा वैसे पहले समाज तो उससे प्रॉब्लम स्कूल में ना जो टीचर है वो जानती थी टीचर के क्या है अभी निकाल मंडे को कीड़े का
Now, we started with which chapter? Nutrition, no? Nutrition. Tell me. Tell me. What is the portion? I know then.
we also got a portion.
Nutrition. Human classification, digestive system, skeleton, skin, age.
I said that.
Or this is called the this is we are already next. This is we are next. What? मतलब ये क्या फाइनल एग्जाम है कि फर्स्ट टर्म सेकंड टर्म फाइनल एग्जाम थर्ड टर्म नहीं होने वाला
मैम हमारे में डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम और रेस्पिरेटरी सिस्टम आ रहा है और वो कर दिया
All portion. Full portion.
हमने बोला बोर्ड के प्रिपरेशन मुझे
हाँ वही
वो तो हम पहले से बता कर हां हम जाने तो वही बात है
और नेक्स्ट टाइम हम सर तो वो 500
नाम बोल रहे हैं ये
वो तो नेक्स्ट ईयर की
बेटा भगवान चैनल में से वो सबको आगे बढ़ने दे रहे हैं
यस
हाँ इतना जेनरसिटी पढ़ाई में अच्छी नहीं है आज वो
क्या तो और चार स्कूल में हमारे
take out your books marks turn to the chapter nutrition let's see
हां मैम
yes
इंग्लिश का भी क्वेश्चन आ गया ये हम लोगों ने पॉलिनेशन एंड फर्टिलाइजेशन खत्म कर दिया है और न्यूट्रिशन चल रहा था और डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम और रेस्पिरेटरी सिस्टम का मैं तो असली क्वेश्चन आई थिंक तो बच्चे दो we have completed pollination and fertilization, right? So there is something like nutrition left, digestive system and respiratory system.
there now we were studying nutrition yesterday. We just defined few terms. What is nutrition? What are nutrients? Food stuff, balanced diet, all these 4-5 important definitions. Now we start with the main part of the chapter. So now we start with the concept of nutrients. We start with the concept of nutrients. How did we define the word nutrients? We said nutrients are chemical substances, the chemical components present in the food. Nutrients are the chemical substances, chemical components which are present in the food. And these components can be what? Organic majorly. These are majorly organic and also inorganic. They can be majorly organic and also inorganic. So first of all, we are going to talk about the organic nutrients. Which are the organic nutrients? To talk about the organic nutrients, we have to understand the concept of carbohydrates. What are carbohydrates? We'll talk about proteins and then we'll talk about fats, a comparative account, let us say. So we are going to talk about these 3 types of nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins and fats. To start with carbohydrate, let us learn some of the specialized features of carbohydrate. What are some of the categories of carbohydrate? What are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are basically, we say, carbohydrates are basically sugar. Sugar-rich food are carbohydrates. When we are talking about the bread and the bun and the rice and the roti that we eat, all these are rich in carbohydrates. The potatoes, the maize that we eat, rich in carbohydrate. So whenever we are talking about carbohydrates, that means now we understand that there can be simpler form, there can be complex form in different type of. Something like I may talk about apple. Apple also has got one form of carbohydrate. The bread and the bun has another form of carbohydrate. And when I talk about the drinks, the juice or the drinks that we talk about, the glucose drinks, that again has another form of carbohydrate. So yes, I will say that the maize and the corn and the wheat and the apple and the orange, all of them have carbohydrate in different forms. So here we are going to understand. Shreya, aage, something better. You're so special today, no? Because you have come after a long time.
Yeah, I missed 2 classes.
2-3 classes. Either way, what happened? Why did you remain absent for so long?
I was offline.
Okay. So now when we are talking about the basic characteristics of carbohydrates, let us learn what are some of the categories of carbohydrates and basic characteristics. Every part I finish, I will give you 2 or 3 questions. So listen carefully. Every definition, every example and certain formulas here you'll have to remember. So that will not write when I am writing. When I give you questions at that time, you will write down the answers. Everything will be there on the board. So don't keep on writing when I'm saying. Try to understand, get it here. Okay. So first of all, we are going to talk about carbohydrates. What are carbohydrates? Let us try understanding. First of all, when we are looking into carbohydrates, the major function of carbohydrates. Why should we take carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are foodstuffs which releases energy, instant energy. Yesterday also we were talking about what is the necessity of taking carbohydrates. Should we take carbohydrates in adequate amount? We should, because these are broken down readily, very fast to release energy. So fats also releases energy, but fats releases energy in a longer period of time as compared to carbohydrates. So what is the main function of carbohydrates? You're going to write releases energy. These are energy giving foods. Carbohydrates are energy giving foods. Next is when we are talking about any type of a carbohydrate, say suppose I write down some common examples like glucose. I write some common examples like sucrose. I write some common examples like starch. In some way, something is common. What is common? It has got carbon and hydrogen in the ratio carbon and when we are talking about example of or the formula for glucose. Who can tell me what is the formula for glucose? C6H12O6. So now when we are talking about carbon and hydrogen or hydrogen and oxygen, it is always in the ratio of 2:1. So I'm talking about hydrogen and oxygen majorly. It is in the ratio 2:1. Carbon and hydrogen also in the ratio 1:2. So now we are talking about carbon and hydrogen, or if I just straight away talk about hydrogen and oxygen, that is most common for you to understand. Hydrogen and oxygen, what are you supposed to write? Hydrogen and oxygen is in the ratio 2:1. What is the ratio of hydrogen and oxygen? Always to understand 2:1. And this is a one common example that you should always remember with the formula C6H12O6, carbohydrates. Now we are going to talk about certain basic categories. So this is the first part that you have to understand. Now we talk about sugars. Are all carbohydrate? Now I already said the sugar present or the carbohydrate present in the apple, the carbohydrate present in the wheat, the carbohydrates present in the glucose drinks. Are they the same? No, they are not the same type. I talk about the carbohydrate present in apple. Is it sweet? Is the apple sweet? No. Which type of apples do you eat from Africa?
I'm not like that sweet.
It is sweet. Apples are sweet. Now, when we are talking about wheat, the roti that we eat, is it sweet?
Yeah.
No. The roti that we eat, sweet. That's not sweet. Now today for dinner, when you eat the roti or the chapati, whatever you are eating, put it on your mouth and sense, is it sweet? No, it is not sweet. When you are chewing it for some time, now you feel the sweetness. You'll understand why. You must have never analyzed this, but that is true. So Vedant, kya ho gaya?
Nothing.
I know he's so serious. I'm not able to digest that. Very good, very good. Keep it up. Be consistent.
Now ask the reason why it's so serious.
Why? I know that must be something here. Of course, for biology, सीखने के लिए serious. Obviously, वो नहीं है. I understand. इधर आ जाओ. You did not do anything. I want you to get the best of the marks in every subject. इसीलिए. तुमको अभी ऐसे so engrossed देख के आगे just shock for a moment. क्या हो रहा है? So now when we are talking about carbohydrate, now try to understand certain aspects. I said, are all carbohydrates sweet? No, all of them are not sweet. So as I said, the apples, yes, it is sweet. The grapes, yes, it is sweet. When you talk about the glucose as it is, the glucon D, for example, if I talk about, yes, is that sweet? Yes, that is sweet. But if I talk about the wheat and the flour and the gram, are they sweet? No, they are not sweet, but they are also rich sources of carbohydrate. No? First of all, we are going to talk about what are sugars. Let's see, what are sugars? When we are talking about sugar, what do you understand by sugar? Certain properties, one or two properties to understand. Sugar, when we are talking about sugar, the categories would be, the first one is monosaccharides. Remember the spellings, monosaccharides. What are monosaccharides? What are their properties? Monosaccharides, what are their properties? So one monosaccharide we have already been writing here, monosaccharide. What is this monosaccharide? We are talking about glucose is one of the best example about monosaccharide that you can remember. Glucose is there. Then we talk about lactose is there. No, glucose is there, fructose is there. Glucose is there, fructose is there. These are examples of monosaccharides. Glucose, fructose, fruit sugar, glucose, fructose. So when we are talking about glucose, galactose, I'm sorry, no, fructose is a disaccharide. Galactose, I should write, galactose, glucose, galactose. These are monosaccharides. What is the meaning of mono? One unit, and the simplest unit. So suppose I'm talking about carbohydrates, when I'm saying that for carbohydrate, maybe now this is a chain of carbohydrates that I'm talking about. This is a chain of carbohydrates that I'm talking about. Now, when these units are present single, one, that is a monosaccharide. What are some of their properties? Are they soluble in water? Yes, they are. Do they taste sweet? Yes, they are. Can they be further digested in our body? No, they cannot be further digested in our body. There are no enzymes in our body. Enzymes are what? Chemical substances. So are there any other enzymes which can break them down into still simpler forms? No, there are no more enzymes in our body which can break them down into still simpler forms. Then are they soluble in cold water? As I said, yes, they are easily soluble in cold water. So one example, and then we have been talking about monosaccharides. Glucose is one. Now let us try to understand some basic properties of glucose. Fructose. So fructose also, it's correct. Fructose and galactose. Glucose, sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide. So I talk about glucose, galactose, fructose. Remember, 3 monosaccharides I am talking about here. Properties, 3 properties or 4 properties we discussed. What was the first property I said? Soluble in cold water. Taste sweet, cannot be further digested, and providing energy. And all of them have got this formula. General formula is this. What is the general formula? C6H12O6. But you may wonder, how can glucose and galactose and fructose all have the same formula? No, the proportion will remain the same. Only that the isomerism will change. The position of the hydrogen, oxygen, only that will change. Overall formula will remain the same. No, C6H12O6 formula hoga. So that's a common formula that you have to understand. Now, let us try to understand some examples, some sources. When I talk about glucose, can you give me one source of glucose, one food source of glucose? One food source of glucose, if I have to understand sugar, give me a food item, a specific food item which may have glucose. Yes. So generally I understand that actually the food item में glucose basically नहीं होता है, but glucose is the simplest form of carbohydrate after digestion. Glucose is the simplest form of carbohydrate after digestion. Same like galactose, when we are talking about, it is present in the milk. But is it exactly present in the milk? No, it is present in a complex form. Present in the complex form. When I talk about fructose, fruit sugar, it is also present in the fruits. So I may talk about glucose, yes, after the digestion of the carbohydrate present in the wheat. Galactose, after the process of digestion in the milk, the digestion of the milk carbohydrate. Fructose, after the process of digestion of the carbohydrate present in the fruits. So now, these are the 3 major types of carbohydrates. First of all, we are talking about the monosaccharide. Remember the definition of monosaccharides. What is it? Monosaccharides meaning consisting of only one unit of carbohydrate, the simplest unit of carbohydrate.
Only found in plants.
Fructose is
Only found in plants.
plant food. When we are talking about glucose, galactose, and fructose are all present in the plant food. But majorly when I talk about starch, these will be basically present in the animal food. And glucose and all, as I said, they are basically not present in the animal food. But when the complex form gets digested in our body, then we get glucose. So as it is, glucose will not be there as a component in the muscles or any other type of a food. What is the next category we are talking about? The next category that we are talking about is disaccharides. तो student है, ये दोनों की demo के लिए कौन से? So we are talking about the next category, that is disaccharides. Disaccharides. What are disaccharides? Let us talk about disaccharides. When we are talking about disaccharides, remember the meaning of disaccharides. First of all, what's the meaning of disaccharides? So what are they also called as? Disaccharides means double sugar. Di from the word di. What are they also called? Double sugar. They are called double sugars. So basically, sit comfortably. Take out your notebook if you want to write something, what has been taught. Disaccharides, they just I finish this topic, I'll give you 3 questions. हाँ मतलब क्या? You are so cool. अरे book तो है, book से देखेंगे तो लिखेंगे. I'm not allowed you to get the book. Can't see the book and write. Double sugars, disaccharides. What are disaccharides also known as double sugars? Disaccharides are also known as double sugars. Which are some of the types? Let us talk about. What are some of the common disaccharides? Common disaccharides, when we are talking about the names of the disaccharides, you are supposed to know. What are those? I talk about sucrose. I talk about lactose. I talk about sucrose hai, lactose hai, and then I may also talk about 3 types. What is it? Maltose, correct, maltose. So when we are talking about maltose, say suppose, now that why did we say that these are double sugars? When I talk about the breakdown product of sucrose will give us glucose and fructose. So now we know that these are monosaccharides, which combine together to result in the formation of a disaccharide like this, okay? Lactose, when we are talking about lactose, we talk about glucose and galactose. Lactose, glucose and galactose. Maltose, we talk about glucose and glucose. So now 2 units of glucose results in the formation of 1 maltose. 1 glucose, 1 galactose, 1 lactose. So why did we say double sugar? Because 2 monosaccharide units would combine together to form a disaccharide. That's why disaccharides are all called as double sugars. Which school you go to here? अरे तुम्हारे भाई बहन है सब हमारे क्लास के तभी रिश्तेदार को पहचान गए नीलेश का बेस्ट फ्रेंड है एक ही क्लास में हो ना साथ साथ बैठते हो दोस्तों के दुश्मन हो दोस्ती है नॉर्मली दोस्ती रखना साथ दोस्ती तुम्हारा कोई दोस्त नहीं आ रहा है कहाँ बैठ रहा है वो तुम क्यों नहीं आके बैठ पहले तुम बैठे हो ना उसके साथ कभी बैठा ही नहीं मैं उसके साथ चलो
Now, next is what we were talking about. What are some common disaccharides? Again, if I ask you write one example of sucrose, क्या लिखोगे? Write one example of sucrose, क्या लिखोगे? What I wrote here, sucrose is present in fruits. So obviously, sucrose is also a double sugar present in fruits. Lactose, milk sugar.
हम तो सुक्रोज में फ्रूट्स है ना,
Majorly, sucrose is present in the fruits.
तो हम सुक्रोज भी डाइसैकराइड है।
Fructose is obtained by the breakdown of sucrose. Jab sucrose will get digested in our body, you are consuming a fruit. You are eating a grape, you are eating an apple. Are you consuming glucose or you are consuming sucrose? You are consuming sucrose. And inside your mouth, you will learn in digestion. Once it is inside your mouth, then that sucrose with the help of enzymes start getting broken down into now glucose, simpler forms. आया समझ में? Lactose, give an example of a food stuff where lactose is present. Example of maltose. Example of maltose. Maltose, you can write glucose wheat, or if I specifically give examples of maltose, then I should write malt containing drinks. Malt containing drinks. Can you give me an example? Malt containing drinks.
What's more?
Malt containing drinks, meaning when we are talking about malt is a nutrient obtained from different type of this foodstuffs like the barley, like the oats, barley. These are obtained from this type of foods, and we get this in the health drinks, the Horlicks and the Bonvita and etc. that you all drink. That is rich in malts. Vedant, तुम कौन सा पीते हो? कोई नहीं पीते हो. No health drinks. That's why your weight is not more than 20 kgs.
Yeah, 23 lakhs.
23 इससे कम ही होगा. हाँ, इसीलिए तुम पीछे बैठते हो. नीलेश क्या बोल रहा है? नीलेश से क्यों? नीलेश is the teacher of the class.
पढ़ाई का पूछ नहीं रहा था इसलिए
I know. मैंने क्या बोला? What did I tell you? Quite a long time back, I was also sitting like you, no? Huh? So I know what you all must be asking. Now, I'm not interested to know also what you are asking. So remember, malt containing foods. What I'm talking about? Malt containing foods are the foods which are rich in various different components of the oats and the barley, all these type, wheat. Okay. So when we are talking about double sugars, what are some of the properties of double sugars? Now let us talk about some of the properties of double sugars. Now, when we are talking about, okay, first of all is we talk about the general formula, C12H22O11. Remember this. Overall formula, the general formula of disaccharides. Are they sugars? Can we say that these disaccharides are sugars? Yes, because they also taste sweet. Monosaccharides are sugars. Disaccharides are also sugars because they also taste sweet. What can be some of the physical properties? Some of the physical properties here, they are also soluble in cold water. Soluble in cold water. Do they taste sweet? Yes. Can they be further digested in our body? Yes, they can be further digested in our body. There are enough enzymes by the help of which they can be further digested. And this is a general formula.
But then if they consist of glucose, if they consist of these basic elements, other their ratio should be same as their ratio should be same as.
No, because when you are writing down the chemical formula in the form of a chain, there will be a difference in the number of hydrogen atoms. There will be a difference in the number of the hydrogen atoms. So यहाँ पे वही चीज याद रखना है. These are different. But how come the general formula remains same? The same thing that I told you here, because of the arrangement, isomers, no? Because of the arrangement of the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Third category is what? Third category will be termed as polysaccharides. Polysaccharides. What do you understand by the word poly? Many. So now if I'm saying that disaccharides means 2 units and monosaccharides means 1, then polysaccharides would be so many of them together, maybe almost about thousands or something around 500 units together, linked by certain bonds. And what are these bonds basically called? These bonds are basically called glycosidic bonds. These are called glycosidic bonds. What are glycosidic bonds? Glycosidic bonds are the specific type of bonds which link the units of sugar. Polysaccharides. Let us talk about 2 basic examples of types what is given in the syllabus. We are talking about the first one is starch. Polysaccharides. The first one that now I'm going to put all this for outside the classroom. इधर आ जाओ। 9th में तुम्हारे ये रूप है, 10th में जब पहुंचोगे व्हाट पवन, उसका नाम पवन है। अगले क्लास से you are going to sit with him only. Let some of his characteristics move towards him. हाँ?
मैं सोशल नहीं हूँ बिल्कुल, इसके लिए कुछ नहीं करना।
सोशल नहीं बनना है क्लास के अंदर। I'm not interested who is social, not social. You have to be just well mannered and interested. You have to concentrate for what your parents are sending you here.
I could explain glycosidic bonds once again.
These are the typical type of bonds. Structures इतना important नहीं है तुम्हारे लिए. These are the typical type of bonds. Like see, there are every type of a typical type of a bond which will connect the units of proteins, units of fats, units of glucose, units of sugar. If I have to say that for disaccharides and polysaccharides, what is that type of a bond called which is actually binding them? Just like the beads in a garland, just like the flowers in a garland, one after the other, one after the other. So I have to just say that there's a specific type of a bond known as glycosidic bond, which is bonding 2 units of sugar and resulting in the formation of a long chain. Starch. Did you hear about this word starch? Are हाथ नीचे करो, sit like a smart boy. No, why are you sitting like a newly-wedded bride? अभी कोई ऑफिशियल मीटिंग में तुम नहीं आए हो, आराम से रिलैक्स like a smart boy and respond करो। वेदांत, I'm not joking. Starch. Did you hear about this word starch?
Yes,
बता सकते हो कहाँ पे present है starch?
In the form of starch.
अरे वाह, very good. After the process of photosynthesis, plants are storing food in the form of starch. अभी खाने में in the type of food items, पता है कौन से वाले? Potato has starch. Corn has starch. The flour has starch. Flour meaning the आटा मैदा जो हम खाते हैं, it has got starch. The gram flour has starch. The grams and all are rich in starch. So first of all, when we are talking about some of the characteristics of starch, remember some of the properties completely different from the rest. They are insoluble in cold water. Insoluble in cold water. What do you understand by this? How do you understand insoluble in cold water? Say suppose I take a glass of water and I put some 2 spoons of flour after. Is it going to dissolve completely? No, it will start only floating up there. It will not dissolve. Then if I have to dissolve it or make a suspension, मुझे क्या करना चाहिए? क्या करना पड़ेगा वेदांत? Very good. I have to just warm the water. या तो थोड़े से warm water में अगर मैं डालूंगी, then what will happen? The flour will get partly dissolved. Dissolved तो नहीं होगा, but it will form a suspension easily, and no lumps getting formed, and it's not floating anymore. So what I'm understanding, insoluble in cold water, but partly soluble in warm water. Soluble in warm water. No, it is partly soluble in hot water, warm water. Does it taste sweet? I already told you that. It is not sweet. It is not sweet in taste. It is not sweet in taste at all. It is not sweet in taste at all. Then when we are talking about the carbohydrates and formula to remember, C6H10O5. Now, what does this N refer to? Can you tell me? The number of the units. So one unit has a 1 unit as a general formula, C6H10O5, and N would refer to the number of units. That means there can be many, 100, 200, 500, 1000 also units linked together, forming a very long chain. But if I talk about starch, starch is majorly present in plants. Does the animal body have starch? No, the animal body does not have starch. If I have to talk about what is starch, basically, starch is the stored form of food. And similar to this, if I have to talk about something similar to starch, then what should I say? Something similar to starch would be what? Cellulose again. That is also a polysaccharide present in the plants. This is also a polysaccharide present in the plants. But where is it present? In plant cells, where is it present? This cellulose is a type of a polysaccharide. बाकी सारे properties लगभग same होगा. But I just want to know, ये cellulose already studied this in the chapter previous. Cellulose is present in the cell wall, in the plant cell wall. I said in the plant cells, but specifically it will be in the cell wall. It's a component of the plant cell wall. But now that I talk about cellulose, again in the concept of digestion also, you are going to understand that this cellulose is majorly now present in green leaves. Or if I say the other way, can you name some food items which is rich in cellulose? Green leaves, green vegetables. No, these are rich in cellulose. And this cellulose have to be digested only by a specific enzyme known as a cellulase. So हमारे body में नहीं है, which are present in the body of the cattle, ruminants के body में ही present होता है. That's the reason this green leaves and the green type of plant food, whenever the animals they consume, herbivores they consume, they can digest it. But we cannot. We can only take in some minerals, but the fibrous part remains as it is, as undigested food in our body because we don't have that cellulase enzyme. So just a basic concept about this. When we are talking about cellulose, it's a major component of the plant cell wall.
Where is that undigested part?
It will get released out of our body as waste. But in the case of plant, it is not the case. No, when we are talking of the plant or the herbivores, herbivores can completely digest the fibrous part also. But we cannot digest the fibrous part. Now the question is that if we cannot digest it, why should we eat? Why should we consume green leaves if we cannot digest? No, but it has got a large amount of minerals and ions also. And that we can digest, that our body can absorb. So cellulose, remember where it is present. And now we are going to talk about another type of a polysaccharide. What is the other type of a polysaccharide that we are going to talk about? Glycogen. Glycogen is another type of a polysaccharide that we are going to understand. Glycogen is another type of a polysaccharide where now I would say it is a stored form of surplus glucose. Stored form of surplus glucose in the liver cells of animals. In the liver cells of animals. Now this you're going to understand. When we talk about carbohydrate-rich food, again, give me one example of carbohydrate-rich food that we eat. Rice or roti. Now that we are talking about this type of food, corn, rice, roti that we are eating, the food enters our body and the process of digestion starts. And when the process of digestion is going on, ultimately, the process of digestion is over. And first of all, what is getting formed? Glucose is getting formed. But at any time, we are actually eating more than what our body actually needs. Do we measure and eat every day? No. Actually, whatever we are eating all throughout the day is much more than what is actually needed for our survival. So, uska matlab yahi hai ki at any particular period of time, there is excess nutrients there in our body. And now I'm talking about only carbohydrates. Then what will happen to that excess amount of the nutrients? That surplus means excess. That excess amount of nutrients will be stored in the liver cells as a reserve. Sometimes now every day there's a long gap, no, when we don't eat food. Dinner to next breakfast, it's a long gap, 8, 9 hours, 10 hours almost. So during this period, when we are not eating anything, is there any glucose deficiency built up in our body? Yes. So at that time, the liver cells will start breaking down the glycogen and release the glucose. So that even next breakfast, also if you're skipping, do we feel very weak?
No.
We don't feel weak. And that's the reason people can also go on fast for a period of 2-3 days, also not a big problem. What is glycogen? The stored form of surplus glucose. Where? In the liver cells. In the liver cells of animals. In the liver cells of animals. So that is about the glycogen. Now we are going to talk about one more word known as roughage. Now we are going to talk about one more word known as roughage. Give me 3 examples of green leafy vegetables. I start with this. Give me some. Spinach, okay. And broccoli. Okay, not too much, but okay, still. Then next, lettuce. Now, when we are talking about all these, what is common in all of them? Fibers. They are rich in fibers. Fibrous substances are there enough. So just now we were talking about no green leaves. Why should we consume? So ये सारे में क्या common factor क्या है? Roughage. Enough amount of roughage is there. ये सब में enough amount. So first of all, these are green leaves. Source of roughage. What is the meaning of roughage? The fibrous substances which is present in the plant food. हर एक plant food में fibrous substance होता है? होता है? Can you give me an example of plant food जिसमें fibrous substance नहीं होता? ये सब में तो होता है. We already wrote some examples. To make it very clear कि हर एक plant food में fibrous substance नहीं होता. Tomato कोई fibrous substance नहीं होता. Potato कोई fibrous substance नहीं होता उसमें. But if I talk about, again, if I'm talking about something like, as I said, broccoli में बहुत कम रहता है. Cauliflower, broccoli, उसमें fibrous substance बहुत कम रहता है. But if I'm talking about cabbage, fibrous substance is high. Spinach, lettuce, fibrous substance is high. So that way. So when I'm talking about, there are certain type of plant food, fibrous substance high रहता है. That means I would say that these are roughage rich. Lettuce. So now, what is the need for this? Why should we consume food rich in roughage? Because these type of foods, when we are consuming in adequate amount of adequate quantity, the process of digestion becomes much better. The process of digestion becomes much better in our intestines because these fibrous substances help in the reabsorption of the water. They help in the reabsorption of water and the release of the waste substances. So I would say that what is the need of consuming roughage? What will happen if somebody is not consuming roughage for a long period of time? The person may have disturbed processes of digestion for a long time and may start having a problem, intestinal problem known as constipation. May have a problem known as constipation where the reabsorption of water is not there, and if the adequate amount of reabsorption is not there, the release of the waste becomes difficult. So that's the reason adequate amount of, that's the reason we always say, green vegetables and fruits every day we should consume in small quantities because unme wo fibrous characteristics hota hai. So this is about the carbohydrates that we have to talk about. Carbohydrates, what is the role of the different type of carbohydrates and their properties? Any questions before I give you 3 questions to write on in your notebook? Anything that you have to clarify, this is what you have to read. Anything that you have to clarify. Roughage, I said, properties nahi, isme tumko as per syllabus, you have to study the functions. Properties are only that these are fibrous substances, these are fibrous in nature. And of course, these are cellulose rich. Roughage is actually, chemical composition kya hai roughage? It is actually cellulose. We are talking about cellulose. Just now I said that whenever I'm talking about roughage, it is nothing but cellulose rich. But now, I said also that these cellulose rich substances cannot be digested in our body because we don't have this enzyme in our body. What is the name of this enzyme? Cellulase. We don't have this enzyme. So, फिर भी हम ये क्यों खाते हैं? Why are we advised to eat adequate amount of this roughage in different types of food? To bring about the process of reabsorption of water. ये सबसे ज़्यादा important function है. Reabsorption of water in the large intestine. Reabsorption of water in the large intestine and the formation of pieces. And the formation of pieces के लिए, this is a necessity in our diet. And the formation of pieces meaning the waste substances. तो ये सबसे important function है. But apart from that, also these fibrous substances add to our muscles. The muscles, the muscular tissue, if you remember, the muscular tissue itself is also fibrous, no? Muscular tissue itself is fibrous. So this fibrous substances adds to our muscles, strengthens our muscles, builds up our muscles. Okay. Any more doubt? Anything? Let us write some questions based on this concept. Number one. Number one. Number one, right on? Write one difference between, write one difference between, write one difference between glucose and sucrose. One difference between glucose and sucrose. Just 1 point. Huh? Write one difference between glucose and sucrose. Within bracket, you write the condition. On what you have to write the difference. Glucose and sucrose. Within bracket, you write food source. Food source, meaning an item. Food item, we'll have to write an example. Number two. Number two. Why are lactose and maltose? Why are lactose and maltose known as double sugars? All the answers you will find here itself. You have understood. Why are lactose and maltose known as double sugars? Full stop. A question mark. Second part of the same question. Mention their simpler units. Mention their simpler units. Number three. Mention two locations of presence of glycogen in animal body. Mention two locations of glycogen in animal body. Number four. Where is cellulose present? Where is cellulose present? Mention the general formula of starch. Same question. Mention the general formula for starch. The last question. Mention two food sources of roughage. Full stop. Next part of the same question. State one important function of the same. That's it. Karo fatapat. In 5 minutes, you should finish. Mention one function of the same. Just 5 minutes. Huh? You should not take more than that. You have a doubt, you ask me. Answers are all here, except for 1 or 2 that I have given you extra. Yahan pe if you have a doubt, yahan pe you will write something extra also. Likho, start.
First question is glucose and sucrose.
One difference between glucose and sucrose. Huh? Based on the food source only, I asked you.
Where are the two locations now? One is
Liver and muscles also. Muscle cells also can store adequate amount of.
No, under the skin.
Under the skin, no. When you are talking about glycogen under the skin, it is stored as adipose tissue. That's a fats. But if I have to talk about what are some of the two most important reserves of glucose in our body, muscles and liver. Done? Rudra, you are getting the answers? Sorry, fatafat. Your first term exam timetable has come, no?
No, not first time exam was.
Podar. You're from Podar? From when? 4th October. Earlier it was? What is the reason? They gave me the portion already. Done? All of you done? Bhakti and Ashita, no? Right. Done? Chalo, fast. The first question we will talk about. Read out the question as well as answer. Nilesh, first question.
On the basis of food source. Glucose is present in wheat and glucose is present in fruits.
Sucrose is present in
Fruits.
fruits.
Yes.
Fruits, okay.
Glucose can be present in barley.
Fruits, okay.
And sucrose can be present in barley also.
Barley, no. Barley will have starch. Wheat, barley, this will basically have starch. And when digested, then yes, glucose.
Also, which one?
For which one? For glucose. For glucose, you can write simplest type of food. You write some carrots, some beetroot, carrots. The simpler forms. But when you talk about grains and all, they always have starch. They always have starch. Next is, what was the next question?
Why are lactose and maltose known as double sugar?
Next.
They are this is because they are made of two simpler sugar components and
Sugar components known as, they are made up of two monosaccharide units. That is, this what should be the answer. They are made up of two monosaccharide units.
and the second one is that mention their sugar in it. Similar of lactose is glucose and lactose, galactose, and similar of maltose is glucose and glucose.
Maltose is glucose and glucose. All of you got that? Next, Mevan, number 3.
Second point.
Bolo, read out the question. Fast.
Which is one location of present. Second one location where the presence of glycogen in animals. Two places where glycogen is present in animals is liver cells and the second one.
Muscle, liver cells and muscle. Liver cells and muscle cells. Liver cells and muscles. That's it. Number 4. That is number 4. Number 4. What is the question I gave you?
Where is cellulose present? Mention the journal formula of cost.
Asha.
Not that.
Where there is cellulose present? Where is cellulose present?
The cellulose.
Of the plant.
And general formula for polysaccharide is? General formula for polysaccharides is C12H22O11. No, C6H10O5. I'm sorry, C6H10O5 whole M. Polysaccharides we are talking about. I gave you what? So this formula you have to write. You go this formula you have to write. Plant carbohydrate. Say start. 5th question. Rudra, 5th question. तुम्हारे लिए 8 बजे तक वेट करने वाली लिखो फास्ट.
Mention 2 food sources of roughage, state an important function of the state. 2 food sources of roughage are garbage and spinach. Roughage is important for the absorption of the water in the atmosphere.
All of you got that? Food sources. Any 2 food sources you write. Main function. What is the most important? वैसे तो roughage has some other 4 or 5 functions. You will be mainly asked about 1 or 2 functions. What is the most important function? The absorption of water in the large intestine. That's the most important function. Is that all? Yes, that's all. So now next is, what is the next nutrient we are going to talk about? We are still talking about organic nutrients, remember. We are still talking about organic. Now the second category that we are going to talk about would be proteins. We talk about proteins. To talk about proteins, what are these proteins meant for? Where are they present? What are they basically formed of? Let us try to understand. Proteins, when I say proteins are, what are they made up of? They are made up of simplest or units. Simplest units. What are their simplest units? Their simplest units are called amino acids. Amino acids. There are various different type of amino acids. Some we get by the way of food and some our body prepares. So when we are talking about amino acids, so that's how we can categorize amino acids under two categories: essential and non-essential amino acids. Non-essential वो वाले हैं जो हमारे body में ही synthesize होता है. Essential ones we have to take it along with the food. So what is the simplest unit of proteins? Simplest unit of proteins are amino acids. So same that way, the amino acids also have to be linked by bonds to form long chains. So if I have to talk about the classification is not there in your portion, like the carbohydrates, but here also the same concept. When I talk about proteins, they also can be simplest like amino acids. So amino acid is same like the glucose that I'm talking about here. Simplest form, जो इससे ज़्यादा और digest नहीं हो सकता हमारे body में. So that is the concept. But can two amino acids be linked by a bond like the double sugars? Yes, वो भी है. Can 500 amino acids be linked together to form something like the polysaccharides? Yes. So that way I can also talk about dipeptides and polypeptides, same like the sugar that we have studied about. Proteins. So I said, what are they? What are the simplest units? Simplest units are amino acids. Remember the answer. Simplest units are amino acids. What is their chemical composition? What are they made up of? Elements क्या है? Chemical composition क्या है? So if I have to talk about their chemical composition for carbohydrates, what did we learn? What are the basic elements they are made up of? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Name the basic elements of carbohydrates. क्या लिखोगे आंसर में? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. For this, now we have to write carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and magnesium and sulfur only in some amino acids. All amino acids, all proteins do not have them. So that means most of the amino acids, they will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Let us just finish in a minute. So when we are talking about proteins, what are they generally meant for? Why should we consume proteins? Or what are some of the food sources of protein? Let us try to name something around 5-6 of them. Can you give me some examples? Okay, pea, and then beans, and then eggs, and then milk, and then meat. Correct. So now, when we are talking about all these various different type of food sources which are rich in proteins, most of these nuts and beans and seeds are rich in proteins. Apart from the animal food that we are talking about, function क्या लिखना है? What is the necessity of why should we take so much of proteins? We are always advised to take most and maximum amount of proteins in your diet because they help in repair and growth, repair of the cells and growth, repair of the tissues. And every day in our body there is dying out of cells happening, wear and tear of the tissues happening. So the proteins are not there in our body in adequate amount. The process of growth and repairing will not happen. So if maybe now when you are running or when you are playing, a small amount of the muscle got torn. Yes, it happens inside the body. But now if you have adequate amount of proteins in your body, the repair will be very fast. Cell division will happen very fast. If deficiency, then there will be a pain and swelling and it turns into a problem. Something more to understand, this also can release energy under emergency conditions when the body has deficiency of carbohydrate. When the body has a long deficiency of carbohydrate, then the proteins can be broken down to release energy. Okay, we'll continue again in the next class.
Sorry भाई और आओ अनीश के वर्ड आने वाला था तो भाई मैं नहीं खत्म हो जाएगा क्या ही करता तू भाई क्या ही करता
तेरा नाम नहीं देता
तू भी देख सुनता कोई नहीं है भाई